World's #1 Magnus Carlsen is back to the board, to the online board I should say. After winning the World Cup last week, he is now playing in the online event of the Julius Baer Generations Cup. It's part of the Champions Tour, very exciting online event with a lot of strong grandmasters participating. A lot of the top players are involved in this event as well. And Magnus Carlsen is playing in this game with the white pieces against Amin Tabatabaei from Iran. And I've picked this game as I believe it's a very instructive game, typical Magnus Carlsen trademark style. And what that means, you will see now. Just before I'm going to show you what happened, make sure to subscribe if you're interested in learning more about how to exploit these kind of Magnus type of advantages. Magnus played here the move e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, Spanish opening, bishop b5, a6, bishop a4, knight f6. And here Magnus goes for the move d3. It's one of the solid alternatives so that black never gets the chance to take on e4, leading to the open Spanish after white would castle. And Tabatabaei is one of the leading experts in that field. And Magnus says, okay, I want to play here the move d3. Maybe it's not the most promising way to get an opening advantage. It's a very modest move, but you get a playable position. And Magnus used it also in that very interesting match he had in the World Cup with Germany's #1 Vincent Keimer. Bishop c5 was played. Magnus also goes now for the move c3. b5, attacking the bishop. Bishop goes back to b3. d6. And in one of these games with Vincent Keimer, Magnus castled here and black went for h6. Interesting move. This time Magnus goes for the move bishop g5 first, which is of course not possible if black gets the chance to play h6 very quickly. Now after h6, black is asking the bishop, what are you going to do? Well, Magnus wants to maintain the pin, keep the pressure against that knight on f6. And black is for a choice. Black has various ways of continuing here, including very aggressive move like g5 to unpin that knight on f6. It's a very typical idea. In the game, Tabatabaei starts with the move bishop to b6. White goes for the move knight bd2. And only now Tabatabaei plays the move g5. So he decides, okay, I want to unpin. He consciously keeps the king in the center because he doesn't want to castle and then play the move g5. So therefore the king is still quite okay in the middle of the board. White goes bishop g3. And Magnus is a big expert. He has played this kind of systems with both colors. And he probably knows the ins and outs. And he's happy with just a playable position. Queen e7 was played. And white goes a4, putting pressure against that pawn on b5, threatening to take so that the rook on a8 is hanging. Black goes for the move rook b8. Pawn captures, black recaptures. And white plays knight f1, also an interesting move. You would have maybe expected white to castle immediately. But before a rook comes to f1, after that you will have to move your rook away one more time in order to get that knight around via f1 to e3. White decides to start with that move. Knight f1, bishop e6, and now the knight comes into e3. It's a very typical maneuver in many of these Ruy Lopez type of structures, but especially now, black has placed its pawns on dark squares. There are holes on d5, even f5 is a very interesting square for the knight to go to. So black thinks, I better get rid of that bishop. Bishop takes knight, white recaptures. And what should be happening next? Now, black has given up that powerful bishop. That bishop is usually a very good piece. White has a pawn on e3, but also a half-open f-file to work with. So white is seriously considering to castle soon and try to generate some play along the f-file. What can black do? Well, in the game, black castled here, but I would also say that a move like bishop takes b3 with the idea that after queen takes to put a queen on e6 looks very solid. Like on the next move you may castle, but it could also be that after the exchange of queens the White rook will come to a6, for instance, to attack the knight. The king can even stay in the center, and I don't think there are any problems here for black whatsoever. In the game, black castled. And maybe black will regret that decision very soon, as white castled here as well. White has two, well, actually one open file and one half open file for the rooks to work with. So black played here the move rook a8 to counter the potential invasion of the white rook on a6. Rook takes rook, and you may think, what is Magnus doing here? He has nothing to play for. His pieces are not looking great at all, but he has seen further than this, and he wants to get a knight to the f5 square. As we have announced earlier, that the square is weak, can no longer be controlled by any of black's pawns. But how do you ever get there with your knight? Well, Magnus has a solution. There are no problems. He can just jump in with that knight to h4. And you may have thought this move is just impossible. It's losing a knight. Well, if you take it, there's bishop takes h4, and the bishop is back on the diagonal to pin that knight on f6, and the knight can no longer be supported by a pawn or any other piece. You don't want to play king g7, as then the rook and bishop are taking the knight, and that's leading to a loss of material for black. So that is looking very bad. Well, the alternative could be to play bishop takes b3, but after queen takes b3, the knight will come into f5, and there are no longer any good defenders of the f5 square. So in the game, Tabatabaei played here the move bishop to g4, attacking the queen. Queen just goes away to e1. And what should be done now? That's a big question. I think a move like king g7, trying to consolidate your position on the king side, is a typical follow-up. Once you have played g5, your knight is a bit loose, but just to give it a bit more aid would be quite an useful thing to do. In positions after, let's say, knight f5, check, forking the queen and king, bishop takes, rook takes. I like white's position. I believe that potentially the bishops can come alive, but the question is, how are you going to make progress? Well, white would love to open the position with a move like h4. Maybe d4 can be considered. If those bishops are coming alive, black's knights are clearly inferior. It didn't happen because Tabatabaei played here the move knight to a5, attacking the bishop. But now look, the bishop doesn't mind to go back to d1. Very nice move. As we have seen already, the exchange of bishops even better highlights the vulnerability of that f5 square. So bishop e6 could be considered here still, but Tabatabaei decided to take on d1, and of course recapturing is a possibility. But Magnus thinks, well, first things first, I jump in with my knight to the f5 square to attack the queen. Queen e6. And now white just recaptured on d1. I think that's a good move. Just taking that pawn on h6 with check is not too great. There will follow king h7. And now your knight is hanging. And of course the bishop hasn't been recaptured yet. So better just recapture with the queen first. The knight is fantastically placed, threatening to take the pawn. Black is gonna protect it with the move king h7. And, well, white has accomplished a lot here by getting that knight to f5, but that is just the first step. If black is able to hold on, well, maybe the advantage isn't that big at all. How should white continue here? Well, in order to take advantage of the weakened king, opening the position seems to be a very attractive idea, and Magnus therefore played the move h4. But I'm gonna show you this move is imprecise, because white should have started here with the move d4. Opening the center is an excellent idea, and one of the ideas black could go for now is a move like knight b3 to prepare this move rook a1, forcing the exchange of rooks. But having played the move d4, white can play the move d5, attacking the queen. Queen got to go away, and the queen is attacking the knight on b3, and white is winning material. This is looking excellent for white. So let's take it back. White played the move h4, of course, intending to take on g5, and things are looking dangerous. But if black would go here for this move, knight to b3, planning to go ahead here next with rook a1, getting rid of that rook on f1, white's potential initiative against the black king is much less impressive. So I think knight b3 would have been an excellent move. Instead, and this is typical when you're under pressure, you're reacting to your opponent's ideas. Black played the move rook to g8. Instead of looking for counterplay, black placed its rook on the g file, trying to hold the position together. After h takes g5, how should black recapture? Well, Tabatabaei played rook takes g5, hoping for some counterplay. If you would have taken with the pawn, I want to show you one very interesting line. Queen f3, putting pressure more on the f-file. The knight on f6 is a liability. If you protect with the rook, now the other rook from white goes to the a-file. You're attacking that knight on a5. If you go back, I'm going to place the rook on a6, and things are looking very problematic. For instance, if the knight goes to e7, one brilliant shot here is bishop takes e5, making use of that pin along the 6th rank. Black cannot capture with a pawn. If you do take with the queen, it's queen h3 with check. The h-file is open, the king got to go back, and now it's rook a8. So here you see that the rook and the queen, they are cutting off the squares from the black king. So this is a fantastic mating idea. In the game, there followed rook takes g5, and that gives a lot of different dynamics. For instance, now the bishop can come to g5, to h4, sorry, to attack the rook on g5, and indirectly, of course, the knight on f6 as well. Rook went back to g6, and now the move b4 is played. But you understand that moves like knight b3 are no longer problematic because black is not looking for counterplay. The rook is on the other side. Knight went back to c6. White played queen f3, increasing the pressure against that knight, as now both the queen and rook and bishop are looking for tactics. For instance, knight takes d6 is a serious idea. White is attacking the knight on f6 with 3 of its pieces. It's only twice defended. Tabatabaei didn't see a better option than just going back with a knight to g8. That's a very sad move. But what else to do? White is having an overwhelming advantage. All its pieces are beautifully placed. And also that knight on f5 is looking excellent. How to make further progress? Well, let Magnus do the job, guys. He played here the move d4. Excellent idea. Threatening to play d5 with a double attack on queen and knight. Pawn takes pawn. White recaptures with the e-pawn, and now the double pawn is gone. White has also a beautiful center. And now the center is opened. It will be easier for white to target the black king. d5 is still a threat. Queen went to c4. And now knight g3 back. Excellent idea to clear the path for the queen and rook to attack the pawn on f7. If you go king g7, well, the knight will come into h5. Things are starting to look incredibly bad for black here. So instead, black played the move f6. So the pawn is defended. But now the knight comes to h5 anyway. So all white's pieces are attacking that pawn. The queen goes back to f7. And now another very powerful shot is the move e5 to open the diagonal for the queen. The knight on c6 is unprotected. The knight got to go away. And there are various moves, including the simple capture. Pawn takes f6. White is a big pawn up. But Magnus had another idea, also a very cute move. e6, attacking the queen. And you don't want to keep that pawn alive. Pawn on f6 will be taken anyway. At some point, maybe white is even considering to play d5 to create a protected passed pawn. So black doesn't have much of a choice. Decided to take on e6. But now after knight f4, white wins big material. Queen is under threat as well as the rook. Queen went back to f7 and now knight takes g6. Position is absolutely hopeless. If you take with the queen, pawn on f6 can be taken. Everything can get swapped in that case, but the endgame of rook versus knight is not a serious challenge for white. So instead, Tabatabaei captured with the king to protect the pawn on f6, but that also allows queen to d3. With check, king goes back, and now the pawn on b5 is captured. Knight g6, attacking the bishop. Queen comes over to support that piece. Queen to c4, attacking the pawn on c3. Rook f3, just simply keeping everything defended. Queen e2, king h2, getting out of any potential checks. Queen e4, together With a knight, the queen is attacking the bishop. Bishop goes back to f2. Very simple. Knight from g8 back to e7. Rook e3. Attacking the queen. Queen goes to f4 with a double attack against the king and the bishop. King goes back to g1. Now all the threats have been buried. Black played c6. White has an extra pawn on the queen side. Played c4, making use of a little tactic that the pawn on d4 cannot be captured. In view of rook takes e7 with a discovered check, you're winning the queen on the next move. So black stayed away from the pawn, played the move d5, but now it's c5. Simple move. Black is completely busted. Played here knight f5, hitting the rook, rook f3, attacking the queen. If queen moves, the knight on f5 is hanging. So queen to c1 was played. And now king h2. The knight is in big trouble, threatening just to take it either with the queen or the rook. Knight f2, e7 was played. And now simple move, bishop to e3. White is looking for forcing moves, attacks the queen. And now also the pawn on h6 is going to drop on the next move. So here, black resigned. I think this was another beautiful Magnus victory. And I hope you really learned something from it. Especially the move I like the most was, of course, this move, knight h4. It's kind of a move you have maybe thought about it to be impossible for a long period of time. But never rule out any option. If the bishop is able to come back to h4, that pin is really unpleasant. And thanks to this move, White was able to exploit the weakened f5 square. And later on, also the other weaknesses against the black king were very nicely taken advantage of by Magnus. So thanks for watching and see you soon back again.